Every time Israel bombs a school, hospital, or refugee center in Gaza, we're told the same thing. They were using human shields. It's become the go-to legal excuse. The narrative shield, might as well call it.
The international humanitarian law says very clearly, as long as you're targeting civilian targets, you're allowed to attack hospitals if you know they're terrorists.
But the law does not work on sound bites. It works on reality.
I have never seen any signs of any military command center in Shifa. But I think, again, you have to ask the Israelis, where is the proof?
So let's break it down. Is it ever legal to bomb a civilian building, even if militants are hiding inside? And what kind of evidence does international law require before that's allowed? The answers tell us a lot more than the headlines do. Now, what international law actually says? The Geneva Convention is clear on this. Civilians must be protected. Civilian objects like schools and hospitals must be protected unless they're being used as militant bases. And even if they are being used at militant bases, there are still very strict objections to what the attacker actually must do to make it a legitimate target.
In particular, in order for essential infrastructure not to collapse and to ensure that civilians continue to have access to basic needs, international humanitarian law protects such objects that are essential for their survivals.
Now, even if the attacker proves that this is being used as a military base, there are some important things that they have to follow. It has to offer a clear military advantage. The harm to civilians must be proportionate, which it's clearly not right now. And evacuation orders must be given with ample amount of time for civilians to evacuate. And no, leaflets dropping from the air and 20 minutes gap before an attack is not enough time to evacuate. So ultimately, even if militants are inside, you don't automatically get permission to attack. In fact, when civilians are present inside even a military base, the responsibility on the attacker increases tenfold. Now, the myth of permission to bomb. Israel often uses hospitals and shelters as dual use, meaning they serve both civilian and military purposes. But under international law, that label and claim alone is not enough. You need ample amount of evidence to support that claim. You can't just say Hamas was there and expect the world to instantly believe you and the law does not apply because you said so. There needs to be actual independent investigation. You have to show what, where, why, and when the strikes were necessary. And if you can't, the bombing of that building remains illegal under international law, human shields argument or not. So what evidence has Israel actually shown? Let's now go to the now infamous video that Israel showed in the beginning of the war as proof that there is a Hamas command center under the Al-Shifa hospital. The then IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari pointed towards a wall with a piece of paper with some Arabic written on it. He said these were the names of Hamas members, their plan, what they were going to do to us. And then ultimately what happened was that social media users decoded that and translated it into saying that these are actually Arabic for days of the week. So it wasn't a list of operatives, it was a wall calendar in Arabic. Israeli officials later backtracked and edited the video, but as we all know, once it's online, it stays there forever. In other cases, Israel's proof has included videos of, so-called tunnels that ultimately turned out after independent investigation to be shafts or, sewage canal entrances, and vague claims of terror infrastructure that cannot be verified because Israel will not allow any independent journalists into Gaza, at least not without the idea present right there besides them. And then number 3, the worst one, coerced confessions from Palestinian detainees under duress. Now, whatever a Palestinian detainee is admitting to on tape after he's been through an Israeli jail is obviously not reliable under any court of law, which is what Human Rights Watch has already said. this is not reliable evidence that there are any Hamas command centers under hospitals and that Hamas is using human shields, because everybody has seen the tapes of how Palestinian detainees are treated in Israeli jails, like State Iman, for example. This is the level of evidence Israel has presented to justify flattening entire neighborhoods and ruining a generation. Now, speaking of Al-Shifa Hospital, Israel long claims that this is Hamas's command center. But when journalists were finally allowed in, with the IDF accompanied, of course, they found something different. The claim of tunnels was debunked in a way when the CNN and the Independent saw shafts, but actually they did not connect to any hospitals. Open source researchers from platforms like Decoded actually then went and verified that these so-called tunnels would have been sewage entrances or shafts that were outside the hospital building and had nothing to do with any kind of command center or underground tunnel network that Israel claimed existed underneath Shifa Hospital, which they bombed relentlessly.
We have evidence that they were holding hostages in Rantisi, but also we have evidence that they were bringing them to Shifa Hospital. We're still looking for the places they might have held them.
The Washington Post and analysts at the Forensic Architecture concluded that Israeli visuals were inconsistent with earlier claims and provided no conclusive evidence of Hamas command center. So they concluded that all of the evidence provided by the IDF did not add up. Meanwhile, patients, doctors, women, children, everybody was being relentlessly bombed, abducted, tortured, displaced. And this is the evidence Israel provided in order to justify doing all this. Not that any amount of evidence even justifies what is happening in Gaza today. So the question isn't, was Hamas actually there? The question is this the conduct of the most moral army in the world? Now, what if I told you this human shield tactic is not one-sided? It is in fact the IDF who has been seen on tape using Palestinian civilians as human shields, holding them between troops and fire, between confronting Hamas members, for example, or during any kind of military operation. Documented by the UN, multiple independent investigators, yet rarely ever mentioned and rarely thrown back by international journalists whenever an Israeli spokesperson or an official is sitting in front of them and says this excuse of human shields. Why do international journalists, most of them at least, not say, hello, you've been using human shields? But we're going to show you that with evidence in our next episode only on Decoded by Farm Media World. Farm Media World is an entirely independent news platform. We're not funded by political parties or billionaires, and we don't chase algorithm. We chase what truly matters, which is unfiltered truth. We investigate hidden truths that most mainstream media does not show you. And we don't go after buzzwords that get clicks. Our aim is clear, to make sure that you get the real version of the truth, the kind of truth that matters. So subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly explainers. Join the Decoded series on farmmedia.substack.com for deeper analysis on hidden investigations. And sign up to our newsletter for investigations that challenge the deeply conditioned narrative.